Americans have never wanted a third party more, but even 2024 might not be the year they get it. Like it or not, the election is here. And for Americans, that only means one thing: staring into the depths of our collective national mirror and wondering how we got here. Look, neither Republicans nor Democrats have officially selected their nominees yet. And there is, of course, always a possibility that something big could change. But as much as you might not want to believe this, unless something really, historically, unexpectedly huge big changes, we are set for a rematch between these two guys. Both the oldest presidents in American history, both unpopular with the American public, and a matchup that more than 70% of Americans say they do not want. Throw in war and migration around the world, not seen since World War II, rapid cultural and technological change within the US, a pandemic that has made all of us re-examine basic ways of doing things, the rise of avenues to bypass the former gatekeepers of American media, global events that are scrambling traditional political coalitions, two candidates whose supermajorities of the country feel are too old or too criminal, and the ground is more fertile for a shakeup to our system than any time in decades. And polls reflect that. Over the past year, pollsters have found extraordinary agreement among Americans. They want a third-party option. Gallup, one of the country's best polling agencies, found its highest ever support for a third party last fall, at 63%. Pew Research, also one of the best pollsters, puts it even higher, at 68%. Both pollsters found majorities in both parties supporting the idea, and the highest support, around 80%, among young Americans. And amid that, we've seen a boomlet of potentially impactful third-party bids. Multiple candidates outside the two-party system are in, and several are currently polling far above the typical performance for third-party candidates. Public intellectual and activist Cornel West is running as a leftist independent. Jill Stein, the 2016 Green Party nominee, whose vote share in the swing states exceeded Donald Trump's margins of victory, is seeking to lead her party again. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a former Democrat and son of the legendary Kennedy family, is running a zigzaggingly populist independent campaign. In the background of all of that, No Labels, a group of former Republicans and Democrats, has promised to field a moderate unity ticket if Biden and Trump are in fact the nominees. Okay. Before we go further, let's establish a couple things. First, it's worth emphasizing that the entire term third party is dependent on one thing, that we only have two right now. And as much as that feels like a fact of life for us, it's not the way things always were. Political scientists generally divide up American politics into 6 party systems. So let's do a quick eras tour. First system, colonial era. Think founding fathers, bonnets, wooden teeth. Second system, post-colonial era. Think Jane Austen, Edgar Allan Poe, the Louisiana Purchase. Third system, Civil War. Think the Civil War and its aftermath. Fourth system, the progressive era. Think Prohibition, women's suffrage, Henry Ford making cars. Fifth system, the New Deal. Think Great Depression and World War II, the Beatles, counterculture, and hippies. The sixth system, post-Reagan. Think Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, and the rise of the internet and reality TV. Right now, people disagree over whether in the last years of the sixth system, the period of transition between the sixth and seventh, or already in the seventh system. My personal take, we're in it. Now, why do we care about all of this? Well, it shows us how unique our current system is. In every one of those previous eras, while two parties almost always rose to be the major players, other parties held significant political power. From the early 1800s to the 1950s, the country never went a decade without electing multiple members of a third party to Congress. In some cases, as high as dozens of them. We also never went a decade without electing independent and third-party governors. And most significant for what we're talking about here, the US never went more than 25 years without a third-party presidential candidate winning electoral college votes. But our current era is completely different. Since the 1950s, not a single member of Congress has been elected solely from a third party. Yes, there's your one-off person like Bernie Sanders, an independent who's essentially endorsed by one of the two parties. But there's no one who's entered Congress just as a straight-up libertarian or socialist or green or whatever. And third-party governors are also rare. The last time someone was elected to lead a state under a third-party banner was former wrestler Jesse Ventura in Minnesota 25 years ago. So before we even get into presidential elections or 2024 or Biden or Trump, it's worth recognizing that we are in an era of unprecedented two-party power. And that reign's potency and longevity is unlike anything the country has experienced in its history. A lot of people have a lot of ideas about why that is. I'm not going to claim to be the only authority here. But there do seem to be some clear reasons. Part of it is that our ways of electing politicians changed. We all know how we elect members of Congress and presidents now. We all have a district, and we all cast our vote in our states. But for a long time, not every state did things like that. There used to be a number of different ways. Electoral college votes could break down by congressional district. You won 6 districts, you got 6 votes. You won 2, you got 2. Or distributing congressional seats by performance in one big statewide election. You won 20% of the vote statewide, you got 20% of congressional seats. Now, we are overwhelmingly in a winner-take-all system. You get 0 votes or representation unless you get the most votes. No more can strong overperformance in one region of the country get you some electoral votes. And no more can getting a consistent second place showing in a state get you any members of Congress. And while there are certainly good arguments for that system, one of its inarguable effects is a consolidation of power among the 2 biggest parties. Now, to get a little philosophical, part of it is also that human infrastructure tends, by nature, towards self-sustenance. Think about most of human history. Our buildings were at the mercy of the elements. One big storm or flood or fire could level the entire thing. And while we still absolutely get reminders of nature's power, we now have an infrastructure, at least in places like the US, that can withstand those elements. It might be worth reflecting on whether our political system is now in a similar situation. Right now, we have an unprecedented amount of money wrapped up in and dependent on our political system. Think about all the institutions that are part of the basic 2-party structure. The NRCC and DCCC, which battle over control of the House. The NRSC and DSCC, which battle over control of the Senate. The DGA and RGA, which battle over control of governorships. The RNC and DNC, which battle over control of everything else. The major super PACs for House Democrats, House Republicans, Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, and the major super PACs for presidential races. Not to mention the dozens of PACs, nonprofits, and other organizations fighting for control and influence, and all of a sudden, you realize that tens of thousands of powerful people's livelihoods depend on maintaining the current structure of our system. And that's a big part of how it's withstood the enormous events of the past 20 years. Wars, global recessions, technological and cultural revolutions that would have and did destabilize previous eras. Our infrastructure is self-sustaining. And finally, there's some clear social psychology. Studies show that Republicans and Democrats have increasingly defined themselves in opposition to the other party. Political scientists call this negative partisanship, and studies show it's increasingly defining our national discourse. With only 2 choices, political polarization is reaching unprecedented levels. And now, back in 2024. Amid this unprecedented 2-party hegemony, Americans are also watching politics be the only thing in their lives that hasn't been revolutionized. The past 20 years have radically transformed the ways we eat, shop, consume entertainment, navigate our cars, book vacations, communicate with each other, even the way our brain chemistry works. We've had bigger changes to our day-to-day lives in the span of a couple years than previous generations saw in decades. And the common thread of all of that is choice. Netflix has almost 4,000 movies. Chipotle offers 65,000 different combinations from its menu. And social media offers ever more options for ever more needs. Whether or not that's a good thing is a whole separate discussion. But it is inarguable that every part of American life has been transformed except one: politics. We not only have the same 2 major parties as 20 years ago, they actually probably have more power. Set aside the trends on poverty or political violence or whatever. Even if things were great, is it any wonder that people want more than 2 parties? We're accustomed to more than 2 choices in pretty much every other area of our lives. So here we are in 2024, in an election in which, again, a supermajority of the country dislikes both options. And we're on a collision course between 2 schools of thought. The first is, this election is one of the most high stakes in American history. One of the 2 candidates is openly and repeatedly flirting with autocratic themes and anti-democratic tendencies. This is the last time we should be looking outside of the 2 parties. The other is, the 2-party system has brought us to a point where every election feels like one of the most high stakes in history, where one of the 2 candidates produced by it is openly and repeatedly flirting with autocratic themes and anti-democratic tendencies, and where both of the 2 nominees are deeply unpopular. Wouldn't it make perfect sense for this election to be the one in which to vote differently? Now look, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. You can agree with every criticism of the two-party system and still feel that voting for Biden or Trump is an urgent and morally necessary task. Because, spoiler alert, one of those two people will be president. But we are in a moment of tectonic change to our basic ways of life, of enormous disaffection among the electorate, of global political realignment, of historic threat to the foundational elements of democratic governance, and of the longest stretch of two-party dominance in American history, and supermajorities of voters are telling pollsters over and over and over that they want something different. Pretending not to hear them isn't just bad history and policy, it's bad strategy. If now isn't the time to make them work for it, when is?